Shame of the year. Ukrainian athlete Rybachuk disqualified at the 2026 Olympics for wearing a memory helmet. We'll talk about this and not only with Oleh Rybachuk, former Deputy Prime Minister for EU integration. Oleh, glad to see you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and it's a great thing that we are doing that for English-speaking audience.
Thank you so much, Oleh. Let's start with the next news. There are things more important than medals. Today, I'm standing up for what I believe in. This is how Ukrainian skeleton racer Władysław Rybachuk commented on his disqualification just before his first run at the 2026 Winter Olympics. The IOC stated that the athlete allegedly refused to comply with the guidelines on athlete expression, referring to his memory helmet. The helmet featured images of athletes who were killed during the war, only a small fraction of them. Unfortunately, Władysław did not receive an explanation as to why there were no sanctions for the Russian flag or why other athletes were allowed to display personal messages while he was not. How does this decision align with the Olympic values of respect, dignity, and solidarity? What is your reaction to this?
Well, I'm frankly furious. I'm not surprised by this kind of decision of International Olympic Committee. This is not the first time that high-ranking international functionaries, among which there is a strong influence, I would say even corrupted influence of the Russian Federation. We can see it in different federations of different sports, but probably now they have reached certain climax in their non-correspondence to the spirit of Olympic Games, because the country which mostly violated all international principles of decency and proper behavior is Moscow, which started wars during last 3 Olympic Games. And moreover, this is the country which continues its active warfare, like today we've been witnessing another massive, or tonight actually, massive attack on peaceful Ukrainian cities during Olympic Games. Rome Papa tried to appeal to Russia to cease fire, to no result. But the most challenging here is the fact that the spirit of Olympic Games is something which is much closer to what our sportsmen did. That is the honor to sportsmen, the idea of solidarity with those Olympic sportsmen who participated previously but have been tragically killed in the war. It's got nothing with politics. It's not about politics. So I think that International Olympic Committee make rather serious mistake, and this story is to be continued. The way I understand it, there would be appeal to international court from Ukrainian side, probably from the sportsman itself, and a number of people who are well known in legal sphere are claiming that Olympic Committee has little chances to be able to prove that they've been acting in accordance with their own statutory documents. They practically violated the very idea of creation of this committee. It's part of global dismantling of international system of security, which we observe now. But it's very tragic that during Olympic Games, which been always a symbol of peace and solidarity and fraternity among sportsmen, this shameful decision was taking place. But I'm pretty positive that probably it will result into substantial changes in the principal Olympic Committee functions.
Oleh, I completely agree with you Olympic values are about dignity, respect, and solidarity, as you said. If honoring the memory of the deceased becomes grounds for disqualification, this is a serious blow to the reputation of the IOC itself. International Olympic Committee, shame on you. At the same time, we express our deep gratitude to Vladislav for his courageous civic stance. This bold gesture reminds the world that Russia is committing acts of terror, and at the same time, it is a profound tribute to the Ukrainian athletes who will never again compete on international stage. Oleh, about current situation in Ukraine. President Zelensky stated that Ukraine needs a specific EU accession date to prevent Russia from blocking the process. President of Ukraine said, if the agreement does not contain a date, Russia will do everything to block it, not directly, but through certain European representatives. We are witnessing these obstacles firsthand when clusters are not being opened. How urgent is it for Ukraine to receive a concrete EU accession date to safeguard the process from potential Russian interference?
Well, it's a very complex problem. First of all, there is a challenge for EU itself. It's not about kind of special approach to new membership after so many years of EU expansion, when they've been talking about fatigue from expansion, that some countries are candidates for decades, without a clear perspective. EU reached that level where they have to change the way decision-making process is taking place. And clearly, while a decision was taken to grant Ukraine the status of candidate, it was emphasized many times that EU learned from previous mistakes, I would say, when they have accepted Bulgaria and Romania without proper implementation of those countries of all their formal obligations. And we see that today's Hungary, the way today's Hungary behave within EU is absolutely opposite to what country promised as the candidate. So EU, at one hand, EU realizes that in order to be this pan-European organization, because the statute of EU says that any country which is on European continent and responds to certain criteria has the right to apply and to become member. But now we are talking about like 10 countries. Some of them, like Western Balkans, are there in the waiting queue for many years. Ukraine is a very special case because we are in full-fledged war. None of previous countries which was joining EU never was in the state of war. Moreover, all previous countries first became members of NATO, and after becoming members of NATO, they've been joining EU. So for Ukraine, there are so many challenges. We are hearing the news that providing this date for Ukraine for making kind of political decision about membership in 2027 is a part of broader agreement, what Trump is calling peace deal, with Slavic accent. We like to pronounce it in Ukraine. So it is not just another candidate moving to EU without sticking to EU-approved rules. It's much broader. The European continent is on fire. There is full-fledged war in Ukraine, and more European countries realize that fire can soon come to their borders. Therefore, it's not simply issue of expansion, it's issue of security, it's actually issue of keeping the peace on the European continent, it's actually the threat of another world war. And that becomes reality. European generals were the first to respond to that. In Germany, in UK, in France, they are speaking about the reality of having to confront Russia in the nearest future. So there are a lot of challenges here, but we Ukrainians, we also should realize that we cannot simply get that decision without doing our own homework. It's not easy, it's true, but it is in our interest to meet European criteria and to become the part of integrated Europe, which is fully compatible with EU standards. Time passes quickly. Our politicians used to speak a lot about readiness to meet all the requirements in a couple of years, but frankly speaking, it is clear that it is impossible to meet and to pass all the procedures and to do all the reforms in 1 year. But 27, this is already next year. It will be very quickly. Time passes, time flies like missiles nowadays, very quickly. And we should do at least basic things to be able to meet EU requirements. And those basic things are called fundamentals. This is the first chapter of EU agreement. We promised to open that chapter last spring, then autumn, then all these unfortunate attempts to undermine independence of anti-corruption institutions postponed the idea. Now we are already approaching the end of the first quarter, and still we didn't even start negotiations about the fundamentals. And fundamentals, this is rule of law. Those are independent courts, those are free media, those are free anti-corruption units, those are, that is independence of all law enforcement from any government institution, including presidential. And we have to do that, because without this, it is practically unrealistic to imagine that we can get the political decision about membership. So we have to do our part. War or no war, it's not the war that prevents, for example, to Ukraine to elect judges in Supreme Court, or to have open competition of the anti-corruption institution, which is focusing on government security. So this should be done, and we need also much more efficient activity of our parliament, because there are a number of laws which could be voted, but for some reasons they are not on the agenda. So lots is to be done, but if we will not be doing that, it will be difficult, frankly, very difficult for our friends in EU to support the idea of getting Ukraine political decision about membership. Anyway, the way Europe plans it, it is step by step. When we are doing something, we are meeting certain criteria, and then we are getting more access to European market, to European decision-making process.
Orban stated that the EU and Ukraine have declared war on Hungary. He made this comment in response to a political report suggesting that Ukraine could join the EU as early as 2027. Orban described the publication as a mouthpiece of the Brussels elite and called the discussed plan military, claiming that Brussels is ignoring the will of the Hungarian people and allegedly seeks to change the government in the country. According to him, the EU aims to bring the Hungarian opposition to power in order to eliminate resistance and Budapest's veto rights. How might this rhetoric impact EU unity and the bloc's ability to negotiate accession for Ukraine? And what do you think about this?
Orban is really big threat to EU. his presence in EU violates all the basic principles on which EU was founded, because when Hungary was a candidate, when any country is a candidate, you undertake obligations to follow common foreign policy of EU and to act in the interest of European Union. What Orban is doing is actually launching anti-EU campaign and looking for such allies as Donald Trump, because Donald Trump administration is also having very strong anti-EU sentiment and obviously playing games with Putin, who provides cheap gas, but we know that nothing is cheap in this world. And Orban feels now kind of cornered because there is very little time before elections. Also, Gallup polls show that he is increasing the gap between the leader of public opinion, which is Magyar and Magyar party, opposition party, Tisza party, and he's getting desperate. As any authoritarian dictator, he tries to convince his people that Hungary is surrounded by enemies, that EU is enemy, that obviously Ukraine is enemy, because if Ukraine becomes member of European Union, and Orban is referring to this decision of, or this initiative to give Ukraine a political membership in next year, he is threatening Hungarian people that if this happens, they would all be forced to go and die for Ukraine, and all the money which Hungary was getting. And to some extent, there is certain truth in this, that Hungary, who is using billions and billions of European money to discredit EU and to provide anti-European policies, while when Ukraine becomes member of European Union, a part of that money would obviously go to support Ukraine. Therefore, there are certain egocentric reasons for certain businesses in Hungary, in Poland, in Czechia, specifically agrarian businesses. It's interesting that there was recently results of sociological survey about support to Ukraine or sympathy to Russia, and the closest members of Ukraine on the border, Czechia, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, they have the lowest support of Ukraine's integration plans because they have to compete with Ukraine. They are afraid of part of financial support going to agrarian sector of Ukraine. They know that Ukrainian businesses are very efficient. They know that we have very good soil, that we have competitive advantage here. Therefore, there is very egoistic, I would say, reasons. And Orban is playing on all these phobias of his businesses, of politicians, of less educated Hungarians, because well-educated Hungarians, like people living in Budapest, they clearly support opposition like any capital. But people in the countryside, less educated, less informed, they are brainwashed, because Orban government controls practically all media, and all this media now becomes hysteric. It's like, if you don't elect me, says Orban, then you are practically dead, because you will be sent to die for Ukrainians. You will be left without support of EU. EU would like to destroy Hungary. EU is supporting Ukraine, and Ukraine joining EU means, again, end of Hungarian people.
Oleh, about presidential election, regarding insider reports about a possible announcement of the date for presidential elections and referendum before the 4th anniversary of the full-scale war. The presidential office stated that as long as Russia attacks daily, it is too early to talk about elections. Safety must come first. How realistic is it to announce elections under daily shelling and without any guarantees of security? How likely are elections in spring 2026, in your opinion?
In very short, highly unlikely, practically impossible. Ukraine is the country, Ukrainians love elections. We are, on the post-Soviet terrain, we are the country which demonstrated that we are not simply participating in elections, we change those politicians who do not meet our requirements. So political competition in Ukraine is very high. We are the only country where presidents are not being able to be re-elected for the second term, because voters do not give them another chance. So there is no problem with Ukrainian voters willing to go and vote. The biggest problem is that of security, and majority of all experts are saying, even if we imagine that we will sign this ceasefire in April, let's say, like Trump presumably, Oleh White House presumably would like us to do, it will require minimum 6 months of complete ceasefire to conduct proper campaign, to give participants chances to present their programs. We are speaking about presidential elections, because for parliamentary, it is another story. Now we are speaking about presidential elections. It's easier to have those elections, but still, lots is to be done. We have now a working group in parliament, which is meeting for the 3rd time today, and they are unlikely even to be able to present the draft of the law in February like they wanted to. So in short, there is no chance that in May we may have elections or referendum. It's very difficult to combine elections of president and referendum. But if ideally, if we would be able to reach to sign peace agreement with Russia, Putin gives us no signal, no chance to hope for this scenario, because we see how he responds to all peaceful initiatives. We have heavier bombardments almost every night. He is getting more force and launching attacks in different directions on different regions of Ukraine. He has absolutely no desire to stop this war. Without stopping this war and without being realistic in conditionalities for ceasefire, it's very naive to speak about a possibility to have guaranteed peace in order to prepare elections properly, to create election booths, to provide to give candidates chance to vote and to agitate and to launch tours across the country. We need also financial support. It's around 20 billion Ukrainian hryvnias. It's big money. We have to make sure that millions of Ukrainians which are now abroad get the chance to vote. And we have to do this jointly with European Union, because EU has the biggest experience, and EU hosts Venice Commission, which is supervising all changes to constitution and all election process. Ukraine was very active with all European observers during all elections. So we think we have to do this jointly with European Parliament, Parliamentary Assembly of Europe, of OBSE and other institutions, which at this point is practically impossible to do, again, because of security, because every day we we are under Russian bombardment, and there is no signal or no even hint on the horizon that Russia is prepared to stop this practice. Russia believes that the best way to negotiate is to increase military pressure, and by pressing militarily, they hope to reach political or diplomatic solution. In case of Ukraine, it is absolutely impossible. Our president has no chance to promise something which contradicts our constitution or which is not supported by Ukrainian people.
And really, in a sense, holding elections during a full-scale war would be only an imitation of the democratic process, not a true expression of the people's will, since the state cannot guarantee basic safety for voters, candidates, and observers. Thank you so much for your professional and insightful contributions. It was a real pleasure speaking with you. I would like to remind you that Oleh Rybachuk, former Deputy Prime Minister for EU integration, was with us today. Wishing everyone a productive day and looking forward to our next meeting. Thank you so much and see you.
Thank you.